Velkommen til LØRN.tech, en læringsdugnad om teknologi og samfunn, med Silvija Seres og venner.
Hello, and welcome to a LØRN conversation. My name is Silvija Seres, and my guest is Maria Sääksjärvi. Hi, Maria. So just to connect this conversation to the ones that it belongs with, this is a third and the final conversation in our master's series about digital marketing. And this is an informal teach me through a chat session about a topic that we think many of our listeners need to see not just cases of, but also some of the theoretical background and concepts for. The first one we discussed the history of the subject and the most important concepts. The second one, we talked about the most common methods and the favorite examples you have that show us novel ways of applying digital to marketing. And in this third one, we decided that we're going to join the two final ones as were planned. So we're going to talk about some of the common myths, some of the cross-functional topics related to what we're talking about here. We're going to talk a little bit about tools and practical tactics. And then maybe if we have time, we're going to talk about how do we apply this to a case. And I'll throw in LØRN, I guess, as a case. So, in our discussion before the recording, we talked about some of the most common myths, and one of them is that we all want more traffic, that more traffic means more money. You say that doesn't necessarily hold.
No.
There is another one that says your ads should appeal to as many people as possible. That is a myth. And then all you need is digital marketing is the third myth we'd like to kill. Let's start with the first one.
So the first one, that more traffic would equal more money, is not true, because traffic does not equal any action on the part of the customer. So yeah, sure, you can drive traffic by doing something scandalous or outrageous to your site, but that's not going to get people to buy your product. And in this context, it's important to talk about the conversion rate. So how many people come to your site, but actually do not engage in any specific action. And to date, we know that the conversion rate is actually, I think it's around 6%. So people who come to a site and look for products, look for information, only 6% of them actually end up buying something. And this to us is a clear sign that, yeah, you can get traffic, for example, by giving Google a bag of money. But if it doesn't translate into any kind of actionable outcome for you as a company, then you just need to start questioning if it's really worth the money.
So we have the conversion rates. We have also things like ARPU, the general average revenue per user. And there is a revenue per click. Can you just tell us what these things mean? So
basically the logic is that every person who comes to your site is a potential customer. And of course, again, we know that it's much easier for you to keep an existing customer than to try to get a new customer. So there should be a separation between those two categories, so to speak. And basically average revenue per customer just means, every single time you engage in a campaign, you have a certain budget, right? And that budget can be very expensive if you want it to, or it can be less expensive. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that there's some kind of payoff involved in whatever campaign you're using. And we often hear from managers that, they pay, for example, advertising agencies these really high fees, but they don't really know if the ad has been effective in terms of driving, for example, sales. And that's why it's really important to consider these issues, because you can throw money at any kind of marketing campaign. I mean, people will take it. They will not say no. But it becomes important to make sure that you're really putting your money into the right basket. So it doesn't matter if it's traditional advertising or digital marketing or influencer marketing or search engine optimization, but you want to get your bang for the buck, basically. And that means knowing whatever money you put in, the kind of results that you get, very concretely.
So very often we end up measuring, the number of clicks, the number of likes, the number of views, the number of visits. But what you're saying is that doesn't necessarily mean more sales. So we need to find a way to connect those things in order to understand the efficiency of the campaign.
Yeah. And I mean, again, in traditional advertising, there is absolutely no way of you to know whether an ad that people saw on TV, whether it led to any kind of purchase. But in the digital world, we have knowledge about these kinds of things. So it doesn't make sense that we don't connect them and that we don't use that information that we have. But I mean, here's the thing. Everyone wants to show up great figures, and traffic is usually a high figure. So it makes you look good, it makes your company look good if you can demonstrate a lot of traffic. But if that doesn't translate into something more concrete, it doesn't have to be a purchase. It can also be signing up for a newsletter list. It can be signing up for a pre-announcement for a specific launch. It can be any kind of action that people take. But the effect of every kind of dollar that you put in should be measured in terms of its effect.
Very cool. So measuring the relevant effects is very important. And I guess that this is also related to the second myth you mentioned. So, should we make ads that appeal to as many people as possible?
Yeah, usually you shouldn't, because something that appeals to everyone usually doesn't appeal to anyone. So it's much better to know who you want to target. And then you tailor your message for that specific audience. And again, these days, we are able to find out how persuasive your specific message is within a specific audience. So just, using a bazooka to try to hit a tiny target doesn't make sense.
I have to ask you a question because my initial reaction here is I'm thinking learn and I'm thinking, but we want to talk to everybody. We want everybody to learn. But then probably I'm not being focused enough, because I'm just thinking with your Spotify example, they are focusing on millennials. The Heinz people focused very much on, I guess even younger generation, because they focused on TikTok and then they apply this to, talk to your grandparents and so on. And the Fitbit stories, I'm pretty sure that they are looking for, people who want to be active or are already very, very active, sport-wise or.
You need to find the target market that your product will appeal to. So for example, with LØRN, you wouldn't be targeting children. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You would probably be targeting business professionals who have already a couple of years of work experience at least under the belt. And you can have multiple targets, but you should know your primary target market, and you should know what do they like, what appeals to them, what resonates with them, what's relevant to them, and then create content accordingly. And in some markets, it's easier. For example, we know that millennials account for most music purchases by a long shot. So it wouldn't make sense for Spotify to target any other audience because that's where the money is, basically. But what I'm trying to say, you shouldn't try to please everyone because you will usually end up pleasing nobody. It becomes too bland and it becomes too, it's not targeted enough for anyone.
It's not even funny to anyone because I think even the sense of humor that you would apply here, as you say, would be a perfect hit for somebody and a perfect miss for somebody if you are focused. If not, it's just, Yeah. Very cool. And the third myth you talked about is that all you need is digital marketing.
Yes, because one of the most important things is that people somehow tend to see digital as separate from their brick and mortar stores. And this should really not be the case. Everything that your company does should be integrated. Whatever you communicate in the stores should be communicated also in digitally. So let's just imagine that Spotify would have a store. So what do I see in front of me? I see this hip, kind of young store that targets millennials, that uses these funky colors and this quirky, offbeat design, because that fits with their target group. Now imagine Spotify would have a store that would be like, say, Walmart. That wouldn't work because it has no appeal for the target market. So you have to see your digital marketing and your traditional marketing as being integrated. You should speak with one voice to the customer, and everything you do should be recognizable by the customer as being part of that one voice. So
I love this concept, actually, Maria, because I think that we have been so focused on the digital that we forget that everything we do in our lives has a physical component.
Oh, yes. And just the... Yeah, sorry. One of my favorite examples here again is Amazon, because they started out with a purely digital presence, but now they have actual stores. So the fact that you are now digital only doesn't mean you will remain digital only. And that means combining everything that you know about your customers, that you learn about their preferences into one single consistent image.
So Amazon has been extremely good at honing this image and thinking very structured and scalable around it. Another company I'm thinking of is Apple. So the concept of Apple stores aligns so beautifully. It's a different kind of an experience store from the usual electronics store you would walk in.
Yes. And actually,
from design to the interests of the people who work there.
And Google just opened their first store in New York. And I haven't been there, but I'm really, really curious because based on the pictures that I've seen, they have also succeeded in sort of bringing Google to real life. But it's also, again, it's about the design, it's about the coloring, it's about every single experience that people have with the brand should be consistent.
Very cool. I'm thinking also, again, we are workshopping on LØRN as we go. So, we do digital education. And for the longest time, we were actually working without an office because all of our production is online, especially with Corona, etc. But we are going to a stage now where we actually want to open, to have kind of an open, folksy meeting space academy, where
Fantastic.
people can come and discuss something they've learned. And it should be almost like a grungy library of some sort. A library where you can talk.
Yeah,
so
lovely.
I think we underestimate the importance of the need that people have to meet, even though especially because so much is going digital. And I think, underestimate the fact that even though people consume content digitally or advertising digitally, they are still in a physical setting. So,
of course,
I use this example in my conversation with Ida. I go skiing in Trysil, and this winter, half of all the billboards, the digital ones as well, were plastered with Storytel. ads. And I thought that was genius, because basically they know that you're skiing alone, you're driving your car, you have lots of opportunities to listen to a book, you're in vacation mode, and they reach you in an appropriate context. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of thinking that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't really talk about contextual marketing and hybrid marketing, but could we chat about that for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, omnichannel marketing basically means that all the touch points that a customer has with a company should be consistent. And these days, I mean, we see very simple examples in the fact that you can order online and go and pick up your order from a store. And that's a very simple example of combining things. But there are so many other ways in which you can really highlight the experience of the brand in the store, because we have a lot of senses that are not really met in the digital world. So, for example, all the smells, all the sounds, the feeling of warmth that we have when we get somewhere, all of these things matter. And there's a really fascinating area of research called embodied cognition that shows that even the fact that if I give you a cup and the cup is warm, you will feel warmer towards other people than if the drink is cold. And this is completely subconscious. If you ask people, they're not aware of that. It's just because we are people. And we respond very intuitively to our surroundings in so many different ways.
I love that example. Maybe that's the reason why I keep drinking warm coffee and can't replace my warm drink with, all day in my office. But the other thing I also wanted to touch base with you is this ethical marketing. Mm. So a long time ago, you and I chatted a little bit about this. I love the example of Patagonia. Let me start with that. Mm-hmm. So this is the outdoors equipment producer, and they had this very famous ad in Super Bowl, I think a year or two ago, where they said, don't buy this jacket. Mm-hmm. And it's very much focused on, let's save the environment. We can repair your jacket or your shoes. And this is very sturdy equipment. But the effect of it was, of course, that people liked them so much exactly for that sustainability positioning that they ended up buying lots of new equipment from Patagonia. In Norway, we have somebody called Storberg, who has also a very strong social profile, very egalitarian, very inclusive. And I think that they live that very much through their brand. There is a company called Vestre. They produce some of the most beautiful outdoors benches and public space furniture. But they're not their founder, but I think the third generation, perhaps, owner and leader of the company has a very, very strong social mission. And he's very concerned both with environment, but other kinds of sustainability as well. And it's really paying off in terms of people's view of the brand. Internationally even. So, sustainability is a safe thing to go for, and you really have to believe it, and then you should do it consistently. But there are other things that are less safe, and that's the thing I would like you to just help me think about. So last month was the Pride month, and a couple of companies went out of their way to show support of the Pride month. And they kind of bungled it up a little bit because corporate is dangerous related to more sensitive issues. So Lego made a series of homosexual figurines. And I don't even know the details of how this works, but whether it was just the colors of the rainbow or what it was. And there was lots of reactions. And then Cadbury Eggs had a commercial that went a little bit too far in visuals around the topic. And again, there was a backlash First, they had to pull the commercial, then they had to put it back again, then the people were fired. So how do we navigate this terrain where we are more and more taking social responsibility as corporates, and yet we don't know how to do this related to our business?
So a lot of things that upset people is when a company claims to support the mission, but then if you look at their actions, you don't see that anywhere. So, for example, there were a lot of companies that posted a black square on Instagram for Black Lives Matter, but a lot of Black people were upset because they said putting a square on Instagram won't change anything. And so if you talk the talk, you need to walk the walk. And that's what a lot of companies don't do. So they claim, for example, to support LGBT, but then if you look at their company diversity and you realize they don't actually hire anyone from that category, of course you become suspicious that this is a marketing ploy. And to be honest, it is. So if you stand for something, stand for it. These are not marketing tactics that you should use lightly. They should be used responsibly. And if you use them in your marketing, you need to show that you actually do them as well.
And so I think many people felt that this would be a good gimmick. It would gain some new customers, but actually, as you say, then you really, really have to do it because you believe it with all of your company.
Yeah, and Lego is also because they go for traditional families, typically. That has been their segment. Why would they support LGBT? It's not a logical connection to their brand. And so I think that this is similar to the problems that Barbie had. You know how Barbie tried to produce professional Barbie series. It didn't really fly very well. People were sick and tired of seeing just the blonde, glamorous, but the veterinarian Barbie and the engineering Barbie and so on. It's a difficult one. You're trying to change stereotypes rather than keep, supporting the outdated stereotypes. But it's a tricky way of gauging where your society is, especially when you're international. Yeah, but let's say that you are a company and 50% of your workforce is Black. Then you can absolutely say that you support Black Lives Matter because you do. And then you can have a picture of your company that showcases that, yes, we are an inclusive company. We have 50-50. But if you do that and you just do it for marketing, it was the same thing a little bit with Barbie because we don't know if they hire anyone who's ingenious. We don't know if they hire anyone who's Black. I mean, we don't know anything about what the company actually stands for. We just know that they put out products because otherwise they might get complaints or people get upset. But there needs to be a strategy behind it and you need to stand behind it and there needs to be a mission behind it. So, I mean, when I was a kid, I wasn't a huge fan of Barbie ever. I mean, yeah, I appreciated the fact that she had so many jobs and was clearly a very hardworking woman. But I didn't question the fact that there were not other versions of Barbie because to me, Barbie was one person and Skipper was another person. So that question didn't really come up to me.
I think we are going back to the topic that you touched upon with your mom. And, for her, TV should be glamorous. Mm-hmm. And I think for us, when I was a kid, I had the Barbie, my sister had the Barbie, and the whole point was that she was so, unreally beautiful. And things change, but maybe they need a different kind of a doll to make the point that the world has changed rather than, trying to, but so if we now, we talked about the myths So more traffic doesn't always mean more money. We talked about that you don't need to reach as many people as possible. You need to be conscious of your target audience and realistic. And then you need to think that the world is still not completely digital. Not everything has to be digital. You have to have an omnichannel consistent plan. We talked about blended marketing, hybrid marketing briefly, which is also this involvement of all the physical channels, but also stores or even products related to digital. And we talked about ethical marketing, or the use of ethical dilemmas in your communication, and tread with extreme care is what you say. And if I now spend 10 minutes asking you to help me get me started, okay? So going back to my notes, you said start with developing a marketing strategy. So if we just summarize what's the main steps of that, then, you said measure, follow up, tweak. So could you give me like a couple of go do? Let's take an example that I care about and know, and that's LØRN. So I need to make a digital marketing strategy. That means, is it a 1-page document? Is it a 10-page document? What are the main headings?
There is, I don't think there's a specific length to it. But first of all, your digital marketing strategy needs to be linked to your overall strategy. So you have an overall strategy as a company, and the purpose of a digital strategy is to support that. So you need to ask yourself, how can digital marketing support us or help us reach our goals? And that's basically the starting point. And again, going back, my recommendation would be in your marketing plan or in your strategy, you should have a clear target audience. Because otherwise you risk losing people more than you convince them. And once you have that, so let's say that you want to target mid-level business professionals who are in the stage of their careers that whatever the degree that they got was already a while back, and they would need a refresher on their knowledge, just as a target. So this can be a fairly broad target, but for example, you wouldn't target very recent college graduates because they still feel that their knowledge is up to date. And they haven't entered the workplace properly yet, so they don't know what the disappointments and opportunities that they can gain from broadening their knowledge base. They don't have that experience or that reflection yet. Okay, so then if you want to target mid-level career managers, then you need to ask yourselves, what kind of digital tools do these people use? So you can assume that, okay, they probably use email, they probably, they're Facebook, Instagram. You can find out, there are figures for all of these things. And you can find out figures for Norway and break it down by region. I mean, there are so many ways that you can get information these days. And then you're
finding your channels. Basically, you're telling me you're deciding where to reach them.
You're deciding where are your customers.
Okay.
And then when you know where they are, then you can think about what would be the best way to reach them. And again, you might not want to target all of the places in which they are. For example, everyone gets so much email these days that just using email marketing is probably not going to cut it. So then you need to ask yourself, okay, we now know where these people are. And then the next question is, how can we best reach them? So, okay, let's say middle-level managers are usually very busy. They probably don't have time to read that much. So probably a short, bite-sized video would be compelling to them because they could watch it during the workday without feeling guilty or without feeling bad that somebody might see them. So then you start to think, okay, video is probably a good option for us. Okay,
can I play ball?
Yeah, of course.
So that's one of the good channels to reach them. The other assumption, one of these hypotheses we have about the market, about the future, is that people have unused time, or people have this time in between. That's when you travel to work. That's when you sit on an airplane. That's when you drive your car. That's when you exercise. That's when you go for a walk. And that is very suitable for a different kind of a format, which is sound, not video, not text.
Okay. By defining it like that, then you do realize who you are competing with. You're competing with podcasts. You are competing with audiobooks. That's your competition, because that's what that's the market you're trying to get. So then you need to ask yourselves, why would they listen to us instead of listening to a podcast? Why would they listen to us instead of listening to an audiobook? What can we offer them that they cannot find on these other channels?
So you're working on your positioning now.
I mean, these are the very basic things involved in a strategy. You typically have these things in your strategy where you know who you're dealing with. And of course, competition these days is a very fluid concept. Because Netflix, for example, they don't think that they're competing with Disney Plus. Netflix thinks that they're competing with every single entertainment channel.
They compete with sleep, they say.
Yeah. So, it's a very fluid statement these days. But it would be good for you to know who you are competing with, because then you can say, okay, what would happen if we would offer both sound and picture? Okay, that would be something different from podcasts. What if we offer sound combined with materials? Okay, then we have something different again. And then you can play around with these different kind of combinations until you come up with a unique value proposition.
So I think we are offering, so we are competing with type Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, but also TED Talks. Also, so people use learning in different channels, and I don't think that, so the problem here is going back to Ford and, don't ask your customers what they want if you're doing something completely new, because they don't know.
No.
So it's about nudging the audience towards more educational content, right?
Okay.
And I was just going to say, so we believe that, a podcast format is wonderful because it allows you to use this time in between. But we believe that if we make the content more interesting and more broad, but also allow you to take diplomas and find these learning paths, because the problem with most of the educational platforms today is that it's a jungle out there, right? Finding content, you feel like learning something new.
Okay, but here's another question for you. You only need to nudge people who do not have an inherent interest for learning. People who have an inherent interest for learning, you don't need to nudge them, you just need to tap them. So these are two different segments of people that we're dealing with, and they require different strategies. If someone's very interested in learning, basically all you need to say is, hey, this is what we have to offer. Compared with Coursera, for example, our content is XYZ. But if a person is not inherently interested in learning, then you have a completely different ball game ahead of you. Because then you are competing with entertainment.
Agreed. And I think both of them are very, very, relevant. So, competing with Coursera or with Netflix.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. And how do you do that in a way that outcompetes some of the best platform companies in the world?
Yes.
But let's say we define a strategy. And so then you start designing a communications and marketing strategy on top of that. So the basic steps in that, if I understand you correctly from before, is that there are many methods and you need to choose a few. Or do you do all of them? We talked about everything from email to video to SEO to.
Usually you want to start out with a couple and just to see that you get your message right. And once you then have gotten some feedback and tweaked on that, then you can start expanding. But you first want to make sure that, okay, this is the basic message and it's appealing to people, it's relevant, blah, blah, blah. And then once you have that in place, and then you can broaden your scope. Starting with a really broad scope is a bit dangerous because then you haven't gotten feedback on the different elements. And it's best to take these step by step. So you first get feedback on the message that you have, or the ad or whatever you want to communicate to people. And then once you have tweaked that to a format where okay, this is compelling, this is relevant for our target audience, then you can start applying it in a more broad way. But there also, I would play around with different types of messages. So if you want to compete with Netflix, try to tie it into some kind of fun Netflix. Was there a show called Sex Education? So you can say, instead of sex education, here's some real education, something like that. So, just something that makes it really fun, because these are people who like entertainment, So just saying learning for the sake of learning is not going to appeal to them. For the other segment who are interested in learning, then you just need to highlight what's unique about your content. What's unique about the learning approach that you're taking and the message that you're delivering.
But Maria, you're saying that it's okay to go to two very different segments. We don't need to always go just for one.
No, because, for example, on Facebook, you have different ads for different groups of people, always. But people don't know that because you only see one. So you assume that everyone else sees the same one. They never do. Everyone sees a completely... Netflix, again, is a really great example here, because not only do they customize all the shows that you see, they have I think they have 40 different versions of the cover that you see for each of their shows. So every single time that you see Netflix, even all the thumbnails are completely customized. And
I'm smiling because my Netflix is incredibly confused because my 4 kids are all using my persona.
Yes.
Because then they get beyond the age limit.
Yes.
But, so I get so much anime and, but it also messes up these front pages. Okay. So we have the basic message. We have agreed with ourselves on what's the strategy. And we choose 1 or 2 or 3 methods. Let's say I choose to go full on LinkedIn, and I decide to go full on video marketing. Okay. And then, I create different versions of this basic message. I create some visuals. I do the creative work. And in parallel, I define the KPIs. And I want you to tell me a little bit about the most important KPIs. So we talked about this, we talked about impressions served. We talked about conversion rate. We talked about cost per click, cost per action, return on advertising spend. Just remind us.
So in your case, again, you might have different goals. And one goal might simply be just brand awareness. You just want to, let people know that you exist. And in that case, impressions is okay because it fits with the goal that you have. And sometimes if you are new to a specific market, that's okay, because you need to make sure that people know that you exist. But then, of course, you also would like people to take some kind of action. So if you post a video on LinkedIn, how many people viewed the video? How many people shared the video? How many people liked it? How many people commented on it? Did somebody, let's say, influential, repost the content? So, for example, an author who's famous or, something like that. How far did the message spread? What was the time frame? And you can track all of that. You get these beautiful charts that just shows you exactly how people are responding to the content. And then if you think, okay, this isn't going so well, then you tweak it. And then you launch another one. Preferably, you would have 2 different versions running at the same time on LinkedIn. Because then you know, okay, this one works better than this one. And then you just remove the one that doesn't work, and then you introduce another one, and then you go back. And, so it's just something that you keep tweaking on until you get the kind of level of sharing, of attention, of notifications, of commenting that you want.
And you do this, I think this is where very often both we and many others go wrong. We don't measure this enough. We don't track, we don't report, and then you learn.
You have to. And here's the thing. I mean, I'm a marketer, but there's a lot of bad marketing out there. Let's just be honest. If you don't track, you will never know. And you don't trust advertising agencies because they will tell you what you want to hear. You want to get down to the nitty gritty. You really want to see the actual figures. And it's so easy these days. I mean, most platforms even give that to you for free. Just to keep track of the impressions, keep track of all the actions that people took. So it's stupid not to do it, to be honest, because it's all there. I mean, every social media site is tracking everything that we do. So it's not like they have to pull out the data from somewhere. It's there. And then on that basis, you tweak it and then you try again.
Cool. So, track, tweak, pivot, and continue. Basically, it's a cycle.
Always. It's always work in progress. And of course you when you grow, and you reach broader audiences, then you again have to tweak the message a little bit. Once you get to know your customers a little bit better, then you can micro segment them. I think Netflix has like micro segments of many, many thousands, by now. So this whole traditional segmentation is getting very much outdated, but it's a good starting point before you learn all the things about your customers. But data is wonderful. Data will give you all that. That's the beauty with data, and the beauty with data is also that data doesn't lie. People do. So but
get data smart is basically our conclusion, but remember that the creative and strategic stuff needs to be done first. First strategy, then data.
Yes, and don't see it as a finished product. Don't make the mistake of thinking this is a perfect ad and people are going to love it and we're going to sell tons of stuff. And then if you don't get the results, a lot of people just bury it. They just want to forget that it ever existed, but that's not how it works.
Very cool. Maria, we are out of time. I wish we had much, much more time to discuss AI and marketing. That's a completely new ball game, and we might actually have to do another masterclass on AI applied to media and marketing, and maybe art. Let's save that as an option. And I just want to ask you to comment recommended reading. So now we've heard this very educational and fun conversation. You recommended a book and an article. One is by Bernard Marr, and the other one is, please say, what do I go and read now?
So Bernard Marr is, he's a super prolific author. He has written so much about AI and tech and machine learning. And his book, The Intelligent Revolution, is especially written for businesses looking to start implementing AI who have previously not done it. So really about, how do you do that? And I mean, very simple facts. You don't have to buy computing. You don't have to have computing power these days because you can buy it from Amazon Web Services. The cloud has changed all of that. So most of the things you can just hire. You don't need to buy things in-house. You don't need to hire a machine learning specialist in order to do machine learning. You can buy all that. And that I think is a very reassuring way of softly getting started, because you don't have all these upfront investments that you might otherwise have. And these are subscription-based models, typically. But it sort of gives you a platform. Even if you're a small company, it gives you the platform and the opportunity to engage in these types of things.
And the digital marketing capabilities gap?
Yeah, that's more of an academic take on the thing. And it speaks to the fact that these days, capabilities are not something that's set in stone. Earlier, it was the fact that you got yourself a degree, let's say, in chemistry, biology, statistics, business, and you could comfortably sit on that for a long time. These days, there's no comfort involved. Everything is moving so fast that you constantly need to be uncomfortable, so to say. And there are people who like being uncomfortable, but most people don't. But to some extent, we all have to learn how to do that. Because otherwise, there's a gap between the capabilities that companies need and the capabilities that they have.
Very good. So, Maria, thank you so much for being with us in this LØRN Masterclass. And we are looking forward to both applying what we've learned from you and also talking more about AI and art. And we didn't get into the cross-functional side of the subject.
True.
So, why should marketeers learn to code? And why should they also be very interested in art, for example? So,
my first response is because it's absolutely fascinating. Every single thing in this world, it adheres to a different part of ourselves. So art, it's about the aesthetic part of ourselves. It's about expression. It's about how something can be very concrete. For example, artists can do an actual depiction of what's there, and it's almost like they have painted a photograph. Or they can make a very abstract, a very rudimentary representation of reality, even a distortion, some might say. But it's still a version of the same reality that we all live in. So all of these things, they open up our eyes for different ways of doing things, different possibilities. And they teach us that there's never just one thing to approach something. And coding to me is lovely because it opens the black box. And I'm a person who likes to be in control of the things that I do. And coding allows me to do that. So if I do something, I can track, I can monitor, and I can come back to that. I can tweak it and I can repeat the process again. But that puts me in the driver's seat of things. I know exactly how things are moving. And these days, we have such incredible tools, we can do textual analysis, we can do picture analysis. You can find out so much more about every single piece of information that we have. And that always teaches us something more fundamental about who we are as people, how we might say one thing and actually do another thing.
I look forward to continuing this conversation. I think that also it teaches us something about what's uniquely human and where machines come into this new hybrid world. So let's save that for later. Maria Sääksjärvi, thank you so much for joining us here in LØRN and teaching us through a chat.
Thank you so much, Silvia, for having me. It has truly been a pleasure, and I look very much forward to continuing this conversation.
Du har nå lyttet til en podcast fra LØRN.tech, en læringsdugnad om teknologi og samfunn. Nå kan du også få et læringssertifikat for å lytte til denne podcasten på vårt online-universitet LØRN.university.